he wants guys that are going to do things the right way. And we're all about competition, but he wants guys that are going to make sure they're 5 minutes before they need to be there, right? They're showing up with a great attitude, giving great energy. Coach is huge on that. All the small things, like that's really what's going to close the gap.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Kevin Flaherty. I'm here, as always, with my good friend Ryan Wallace. We're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. It's National Signing Day, and we'll be talking with Kansas Director of Scouting Billy Bonneau about the Jayhawks recruiting and portal classes. You won't want to miss that. This special episode should appear on the Kansas Jayhawks News and Analysis KCSN channel on YouTube. But to find all of our episodes from here on out, subscribe to the KCSN Varsity channel to follow along. You'll get a notification if we do a live show like we did with Ian Premer announcing his finalists this past year. And you'll be able to find each show regardless of its content there, whether it's Kansas, Kansas State, or more Missouri focused. Remember to like this video and leave a comment as well. We do check our comments and try to answer any questions that we find. If you're listening on an audio platform, you can leave us a review, a 5-star rating, wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify, and follow along with Verbal Commitment on KCSN there. Word of mouth always helps too, so tell your friends about us. As always, we appreciate you guys helping us to grow and getting us in front of more people like you. Kansas landed the number 64 overall class, according to 24/7 Sports, with that overall ranking taking into account both the players signed in a more traditional recruiting window, high school players and junior college transfers, and all those players added through the transfer portal. This includes the number 61 recruiting class and the number 52 transfer class, as Kansas brought in 18 recruits, one of them being an Australian punter who is not ranked. So it's really kind of 17 recruits there from a ranking standpoint, and 30 transfers. Ryan, I know we felt like the Jayhawks really went to work in the trenches on both sides of the ball in this class with guys like Caden Snyder, Hunter Higgins, Drayden Punt out of the high school ranks, and a strong defensive line group and group of multi-year transfers on the offensive line out of the portal.
Yeah, and I mean, boy, that defensive line, like Jim Panagos went to work in the portal on that defensive line. They got a lot better, at least, on paper, and not just better, but like bigger. And here's what else, Kevin, is like, and I'm going kind of a little bit off what I hear from you, right? You're more plugged in Lawrence than I am, but like they weren't like that thin, I don't think, right on the defensive line as it was. So like, if anything, this is just bolstering what was already like had some parts to it, right? And now you're adding even more pieces and more elements. So really like what KU did in the trenches for sure. And then again, we talked about it. It's kind of, it's the storyline right now with this KU class, kind of fairly or unfairly. Dylan Edwards, right? And Look, again, we talked about it on the show before. So if you've heard this before, you'll hear it again. But like, it's a dice roll. And I think KU is aware of that, but they feel like they've done their homework and feel like that it's a dice roll that's worth taking, because again, nobody, myself included, is going to argue that when Dylan Edwards is healthy and when he's at his best and he's happy and things are clicking, like he is as electric and dangerous and dynamic a player that any offense would want on their system. And I shudder to think a little bit about what this KU offense will do with Andy Kotelnicki back at the helm. All the different things that a creative mind like him could do with Dylan Edwards. It's frightening, and that should excite KU fans. So if they can kind of solidify the lines like you and I think they've done on paper, and figure out the quarterback play, right? That's obviously the big question mark. Dylan Edwards could be a guy that they could really lean on.
Yep. Chase Jenkins, the quarterback from Rice, was another transfer that they kind of brought in late. We had a chance to talk to Lance Leipold and Andy Kotelnicki a little bit earlier today. And it was very apparent that they just said, hey, we want a mobile quarterback, a guy who can really move, who can really run. Cole Ballard is more of a physical runner. Isaiah Marshall, that's obviously a strength of his, being, that 10, 9, 11 flat 100-meter guy, that he's got some real speed to him. But adding another sort of speedy guy in there that allows them to have somebody who could compete for the starting job now. And then, when you look at locally, bringing in Jalen Mason to kind of sit behind those guys and learn the system as well.
Do you feel like at all, and we can dive deeper into the class here in a second, but a question just came to my mind, and maybe it's out there for KU fans, but do you feel at all like maybe with what what KU was able to do at the quarterback position, when you solidify yourself with the Dylan Edwards, with Willis, another kind of experienced, bigger back out of Syracuse, to couple with all the other backs that KU has that you and I've talked on this show before, we really like the depth in that running back room for Jonathan Wallace. Like it strikes me as, hey, they feel like, again, if they can solidify the offensive line, was strictly talking about offense here, Kevin, they can solidify that offensive line, and they feel pretty good about that running back room. And they feel like they've got some capable receivers. Maybe not the juice that they had a couple years with the Lawrence Arnold and the Luke Grimms, but guys that can be effective, right? That they're kind of relying, it seems like to me, on Andy Kotelnicki's creativity, kind of making the sum of the pieces better. Do you buy what I'm selling here in terms of, like, again, leaning on the run game? Let's make sure we can solidify that line of scrimmage, because we're going to trust in Andy Kotelnicki's play calling, his creativity, the coaching ability, that you're not going to need Jerry Rice on the outside. You don't need, you might not have Jalen Daniels, but maybe you don't need a Jalen Daniels at quarterback to still make this offense hum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Andy Kotelnicki, the way I would describe him, is a support beam, right? He takes the pressure off of, whatever he is there to support. And what I mean by that is all the motion, the different looks, the misdirection, the things they do, it kind of takes the pressure off the offensive line a right. little bit. The way that he runs that and disguises things, quarterbacks' reads aren't as complex, and a lot of times you're throwing to a guy who's open because you just tricked the defense. In the running game, even when they had Devin Neal, Ryan, it wasn't, hey, let's line up and give Devin the ball 30 times, right off tackle, and that's going to be what it is. They used some creative ways to get him the ball, whether that was the Wildcat that we saw when KU played K-State a couple years ago, when KU was down its quarterbacks, whether that's getting him the ball in the passing game or finding ways to get him the ball on the edge. I think that's maybe the biggest strength of Andy Kotelnicki, is with the way he spreads sort of the pressure around, there's not one spot where you say, gosh, if we're not good at quarterback, the offense is going to be bad. Or gosh, if our running backs are merely decent, the offense isn't going to be able to operate. And I think that's one of the things that's intriguing about bringing in a guy like a Dylan Edwards is, where's Dylan getting his touches? Like, hey, don't get me wrong. Dylan Edwards' touch is a good touch in general, but is he getting an option pitch where he's already on the edge running full speed forward and able to take off? Is he getting stuff in the screen game in space? How are you getting him the ball, and are you able to get guys into positions where it fits them the best? And I think that he brought up the example today of, hey, if you've got a 140-pound receiver, you probably don't want him out on the field cracking on a linebacker.
Right.
You want to ask him to do things that he's good at. And I think that's going to be one of the strengths as well. Is I don't think you're going to have him saying, it's 3rd and 2, let's run Dylan Edwards between the tackles, with everybody knowing that we want to run between the tackles. He's going to mix things up and kind of spread things around. And like you said, make it to where the sum of the parts is or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Sure. Well, and again, I derailed things there for a second, but getting us back on track. I know we talked about it in December, Kevin, but again, wanted to reiterate the job that KU was able to do in state at the high school ranks. Obviously, you lose JJ Dunnigan, and we talked about this before. It's kind of like maybe you lose the cherry on top of a cake and some of the icing or whatever, but like, it's still a good cake. Like there's still enough kind of elements there that make a pretty good recipe. Like you and I like what Hunter Higgins can be, right? We've seen, as he gets a little bit more athletic and he got more healthy as his senior year went on. And he's still so strong. Like he's a guy that can really anchor the defensive line. And again, maybe a guy they don't need right away. And that's not a bad thing for Hunter. Josh Galbraith, tremendous athlete at linebacker, a guy from Lawrence. I feel like he's just going to really embrace wearing the Jayhawk colors and being out there on the field. Like that's a guy that I'm really intrigued to see where his career goes in Lawrence. And then the tight ends, man, I'll pitch it back to you with them, and you can take it kind of from there. But Oots and Sullivan, I think, are two really tremendous local ads that are just really good football players.
Yeah, absolutely. Great frames, can do a lot of different things. Sullivan was a little bit better blocker than I gave him credit for when we saw him in person. Oots is a little bit better receiver than I gave him credit for before we saw him in person. But I think both of those guys have a chance to be really, really good football players and can be out on the field at the same time doing things together. A guy that I really like, and it sounds weird to say that because he's the top ranked guy in KU's recruiting class, but we talked about on the K-State side with LaMarcus Barber. K-State trusted their evaluation on LaMarcus Barber. They never wavered, right? Like even when LaMarcus wasn't collecting offers from other places, they said like, that's our dude. That's the guy that we want. KU was rewarded for its stick-to-itiveness, I guess, with Caden Snyder, because Caden Snyder was a guy that popped really early, got offers from places really early, wound up having a little bit of an illness, I believe. When we saw him at K-State O-line, D-line, he was probably in the 230s because of basketball and illness. He's up into the 290s. He's hit over 300 now. Kansas never wavered. They were always like, Caden's our guy. And I think they wound up getting rewarded for sticking that out because Caden, by the end of his career at Salina Central, was exactly what you kind of hoped he would be all along.
Caden was so damn good as a senior. He just had a tremendous campaign to finish off his career at Salina Central. And let's just say, finished it with a championship, like a state title trophy. So that in itself says a lot. And again, that offense rode behind his backside quite a bit, and he delivered time and time again. One of the most mobile, fluid offensive linemen in this class, in the state, really kind of in the region. Just a guy that is so nimble on his feet, got a lot bigger, got a lot stronger. Kevin, again, I don't know as much about, admittedly, don't know as much about kind of what the competition is going to look like at offensive line, particularly at tackle, which is kind of sounds like that's kind of where he'll start. But you and I have discussed he could be a damn good guard if they ever needed him to. He could kind of interchangeable, but he strikes me kind of as he could take a Calvin Clements path in my mind of like, you might not need him right away. You might not see him much right away, but like, KU gets to a bowl game or something and some guys opt out or some guys are nicked up, like would not surprise me if you see him on like a postseason depth chart at the 1 or 2 spot when it's all said and done. Just give his body a little time to get a little bit more strength, a little bit more conditioning, kind of figure out the KU scheme. But I'm a believer in Caden Snyder now after the senior year. He was fantastic.
KU also went on a couple other guys that they really trusted their evaluations on in Nate Sims, and Nate Sims pairing with Tyron Parker being the more highly recruited of the two. But Nate wound up having an injury. We didn't get a chance to see him as a senior, but good size, track speed, obviously, really fast kid. And then Jalen Mason, I think, is the other kind of intriguing guy. We mentioned him real briefly earlier, but Ryan, it says a lot about a kid when you know you're going into camp and it's kind of like you're throwing for your offer and he rises to the occasion and has a really strong performance. And I know we've seen Jalen since he was a high school freshman and saw the way that he was able to grow at that quarterback position.
I saw Jalen at one of K-State's summer camps. I guess it would have been a year ago. And I thought he was good enough there where K-State could have offered. You could have made the argument they should have offered. I think we've seen him grow cerebrally so much.
Yes.
He is so calm in the pocket now, very confident in himself. I think as long as that doesn't waver, in the college transition where there might be some more bad days than good days out of the gate, right? With the speed of the game and everything, he's just a guy that I feel like is going to be very reliable for KU. I don't know if he'll ever start games for KU. Maybe he does, but in a pinch, he strikes me as a guy that I think the KU staff is going to be very confident can go out there and execute and still deliver when it matters most.
By the way, his high school teammate headed to Kansas as a walk-on, enrolled early, Griffin Baker. And the interesting thing about that, I'm not saying he's going to start as a freshman, but remember, KU lost several wide receivers, grabbed 2 out of the portal. It's likely that there is a young guy who climbs into that rotation. And so getting himself onto campus early, obviously he's got the comfort level with Jalen Mason. But overall, I think Griffin Baker is a guy you would consider a walk. I know people call him preferred walk-ons, but he's kind of that next level up, a walk-on plus, if you will, where a lot like a Blake Jay at Kansas State, you almost kind of expect this guy to get on the field at some point at Kansas.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you and I, when we were out at 7-on-7, this like about a year ago, everybody from Wichita area was talking about this big Griff, 6'3", and he's just crafty. He's maybe not the most explosive athlete out there, but like a guy that is not afraid to get into traffic and make some catches. Pretty crafty route runner, and again, kind of a bigger target, long arms, like good catch radius. So you're right. I think Griffin Baker would not surprise you or I if somehow he starts to, you start hearing his name from coaches about a guy that's quietly impressing. Maybe more so than they expected. Griffin Baker can really go. Look, again, applause to the KU staff for one thing that Lance Leipold's staff has been determined to do and has done tremendously better than any other KU staff before them. And I know it was a low bar, but like the way they've evaluated preferred walk-ons and gotten guys that I feel like immediately make that roster more competitive. They've done it again this year. Griffin Baker was one. Connor Hannick is a guy that I know you really like. Parker Schwartz, Jack Reeves was freaking unreal as a senior. I think bare minimum, he's a special teams guy for 4 years that will leave it all out on the field. And then, they add Xander Blasing and a guy late, AJ Batiste, that, from Wichita Collegiate that was, among the best kind of two-way athletes at that level at collegiate that you're going to find. Really good hoops player that became a pretty dynamic offensive weapon for collegiate, a guy that they were coming doing some things on end arounds with, and he can go up and make some acrobatic catches. So really good kind of under the radar late finds that this KU staff has added, again, as you said, kind of in that preferred walk-on or walk-on plus category.
You don't usually see wide receivers with his kind of size who also are 10, 800-meter guys going as walk-ons. And that's something we're going to have to get a little bit more used to seeing, because these preferred walk-on spots are so coveted that they almost are like extra scholarship guys.
No doubt. I mean, it's very competitive now. We always thought that the preferred walk-on like recruiting market in November to like January was like always much more heated than people realize. But now, because those spots are so few, you're right, it's even more heated, and the players you're getting to walk on now are probably even better and more ready than they ever have been in the past.
A quick reminder that you can follow along with us on Twitter/X at verbalcommit_KC for clips from the show, conversations about local players, and even the odd highlight. And subscribe on KCSN Varsity to see all of our shows here on YouTube. We'll be right back with our interview with Kansas Director of Scouting Billy Bonneau after this.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. We're joined by Kansas Director of Scouting, Billy Bonneau. Billy, welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Billy, you joined the Kansas staff in 22 as Assistant Director of Player Personnel, and as Director of Scouting, you oversee the offensive evaluations for a lot of high school players. This year, a number of those offensive players were local guys, whether that was Jalen Mason, wide receivers Nate Sims and Tyron Parker, tight ends from Kansas City, Jack Oots and Kevin Sullivan, and offensive tackle Caden Snyder. That's a really long way to say the question I have is, how much did it mean for you guys to be able to do so well on that side of the ball, but also do it locally?
Yeah. I mean, it means everything, right? It's you want to protect your backyard. And, for me, coming here, I didn't know much about Kansas City, being from upstate New York. And I'll be honest, the talent supersedes everything I would have expected. And so for us to not have to go too far, you got to know your backyard. And I think it took some time to build the relationships with the coaches. And, for a lot of these guys, like you talked about, we offered as sophomores, sometimes as freshmen, right? So you're able to get these guys, back over here, whether it be for a junior day or game day. And before we know it, they've been on campus 10 times, and so we don't take that lightly. And we're going to look at other areas across the country as everybody else does. But when we can get a guy in state, and we really look at Kansas City, Missouri, just like Kansas, we look at those guys as homegrown bodies, and it means a lot to us. And for them to now finally all be walking through our doors, it just come full throttle. It's been awesome to have those guys here.
Billy, like how much of I guess you kind of answered it when you said a lot of the guys that were local talents that you guys were able to land, you offered as sophomores. So this has been years in the making. But do you recall, or can you as a speaking on behalf of the staff recall like the moment when you guys maybe started to realize like 2026 could be a really good year for us locally, like when all the pieces started to come together and you realize, man, we're sitting really good with a lot of these guys that we've wanted for 2-3 years?
Yeah, I would say you probably started looking at going into their junior year. You really started looking at, wow, we've offered almost 10 of these guys in state, and if we could get half of them, you would have felt great, but to get as many as we did, and not every year's like that. Sometimes just the ebbs and flows of things. We try really at 6-hour radius. If you wanted to extend it to 8 hours with Denver, but we really want it to be a 6-hour radius, and as much as we can control it. Now, problem is everybody else in the country knows that too, right? So especially this past month in January, we're seeing all the guys coming through the local schools, and that's a great thing for all the schools, coaches included. So they deserve that opportunity to have their best foot forward for what the recruiting cycle is going to be. But we pride ourselves in getting in early. I still look back to when we offered Jaden Woods his first offer, right? A lot of guys, it's uncomfortable to be the first sometimes, and we really take pride in being that school that gets in early. We don't need to see a whole bunch of offers beforehand, and then it's just about building a relationship. And you can't control the waves in January, which kids blow up, which kids don't. You just got to be confident and convicted in your thoughts. And I think our staff really does a great job of having that conviction. And when you can do it right within your backyard, it means everything. So
the first of those local guys to pull the trigger was Jalen Mason. And he was a guy that came in, you guys had him at camp, and for lack of a better way to put it, he knew he was singing for his supper, right? He knew going into camp, hey, if I perform well at this camp, that's how I earn my offer to Kansas. What does it say about him, not just the fact that he committed early, but also the fact that he played so well when he knew he had pressure on him, when he knew, hey, I can't have a bad day today if I want to earn this offer from Kansas?
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about Jalen Mason. He really took that, and ran with it when he jumped in, as far as just being a leader, being a catalyst for this class. We know Wichita, notoriously has been more, suited to the team down the street. And, it takes a little bit extra, work for us to be able to win those relationships in the schools and win the high school coaches. We've been intentional about it. And, for us to get, a couple guys from that area in that class, between him and Hunter, and then obviously you really want to throw Caden in that mix as well. we really have taken a lot of pride in that. But no, Jalen, he was recruiting other guys to come with him. He was talking to Hunter all the time. He was talking to Caden all the time. And so it just starts with a couple guys to believe in you early, and then all of a sudden the dominoes start to stack. And I think when you start to see other guys jump in, you feel like a little more confident. Okay, maybe this is the right decision for myself. Because I think some of these guys, they feel like Kansas is home, but they need someone else to do it before them, And so I think for us, it's just been putting our arms around all these guys and showing them love every time they come through. And as a staff, I just think we've done a really good job of making sure we swarm these guys with as much love and support and belief in them right from the jump. So,
Billy, maybe, there wasn't one specific guy, but again, kind of speaking for the staff, was there a commitment or commitments that surprised you guys at all in terms of maybe one that when it started, you didn't know if you were going to win, but when it all, settled, when the dust settled, you wound up kind of having some things fall in your favor. And again, just a recruitment overall that you got a sense that the staff was really proud that they came out victorious on.
I don't know if there was one that stood out. I just think it was the collection of how many, I think, and really a lot of these guys, it's not just us in Kansas State, there's a lot of guys that had offers all across the country. And I think for us to go toe to toe with some other Big Ten schools, some other SEC schools, and some of these guys and to win the battle. I mean, I think it's more the collection of just how many guys really, when you throw in Kansas City, Missouri too, with Sullivan and Oots, I mean, we look at those guys as homegrown talent too, and I think that's really where you look back at this class. It's astonishing how many guys are just right down the street from us that you look back how many times I've been on campus, it all plays dividends to where they're stepping on campus and they're confident in their ability. And, so we're really excited about this young group of guys that are now going to be freshmen for us.
Most of these guys committed before ever seeing a game at the new booth. You were showing them either, giant things of construction, like, hey, we just knocked this whole thing down, or you were showing them renderings and things of that nature. How cool was it to get to have them see, that before they wound up having to sign on the dotted line? But also, how much did it mean that they were able to trust you guys and say, okay, we believe in this process, before they could actually see some of those fruits?
Yeah, I think the belief that group had, we were selling a vision that wasn't built yet. And so to see the renderings of what's still coming down the pipe, they were the first group that really believed in us from just the big picture of what we were selling. And by and large, they all bought into it early. And, you had to still stay on them because, like I said, the January wave comes and, you're seeing the Josh Galbraiths get Michigan. You're seeing Hunter Higgins get Wisconsin. You have to weather the storm. And I think for us, that's building the relationships. And that's really where getting those guys over, not taking for granted. Nate Sims is coming back to watch practice. Tyron Parker is coming back just to sit in on meetings. Like, you have the availability to do that with all those guys. But yeah, I still remember, right after we left to go to the bowl game to Phoenix, they tear it down. And that whole spring, we're operating out of the indoor, out of Rock Chalk Park. And there's nothing to show other than just some of the renderings that we were still kind of learning about as we went. And so for that group to really, truly believe in what we were telling them, it means a lot to us. And I know it means a lot to our head coach, Coach Leipold. And, to have that belief in these guys that they're like, hey guys, we understand it's not there yet, but it's coming. We want to be a part of it, and we want to sell this thing out. We want to build it the right way with Kansas kids. And so it's meant a lot to our staff and our program.
Billy, you mentioned like the relationship and connection part of what you do. And obviously you get in kind of at the ground floor and are able to strike up a bond with these guys for a long time. Were there guys in this class, maybe they were local guys, maybe they were out-of-state guys, that you over time felt like, you could lean on for help, or guys that were coming to you like, hey, who do I need to call to help maybe get a commitment or anything? Was there a prospect where, again, kind of by the time he inked his name with Kansas, you just felt like you had a strong connection with him, and a player too that you just felt like you could really trust, not only kind of through the recruiting process, but now as Jayhawks for years to come?
Yeah, I think you'd probably say Hunter and Caden. I'd probably say those two have really taken the torch. We had Hunter speak at, junior day the other day, just a confident, guy that, really wears Kansas on his sleeves. And I think those two guys were huge for us. I talked about Jalen again. It's been a lot of guys, but those probably a couple guys stand out is just as far as taking the flag, wanting to run with it, wanting to recruit the next class, and really wanting to build this thing, the way we want it to be built as well, with guys that are from the 6-hour radius, guys that are from the Kansas City, Kansas, St. Louis, right, all of that. We want those guys to be here. It's just taking time and effort, and obviously building what we're doing right now. We're a lot flashier toy on the market right now, and I think so people come in, they see our facilities, and even Coach K coming back, right? He's like, man, these facilities are top notch, just like every other school in the Big Ten. And you don't know that, right? You come to work every day, you see this thing being built, you're like, wow, this is a cool place to be. But you're only going off of what you're seeing, when you travel, and you're seeing really small glimpses of it when you go on the road. But for other people to tell you that, yeah, we've been to other schools and this place is just as good as I've seen it out there, we're proud of it. And but I just think for us, it's the relationship piece, and talk about Caden, talk about Hunter, we got in early on those guys, and they just believed with us. And so the moment they jumped in, they're like, all right, how can we help? How can we go get this player? How can we go get that player? And then that doesn't happen often, and so for some of those guys, it really stood out in helping us with the recruitment, because, the players that want to recruit the other players, like that's going to go a lot further sometimes than what might fall on deaf ears. Us, hey, I'm going to send you a graphic. Hey, I'm going to, send you an invite. Like when you get other players reaching out to you, like, hey man, let's do this thing together. That goes a lot further. So I think that's where we really made this class special, as they started recruiting one another.
You've talked a lot about the relationship aspect of it, and obviously you're not going to get every guy that you would like to have. But what does it say about your guys' ability to build relationships with a guy like Dylan Edwards? And I know you're not as involved in the transfer portal, but here's a guy who went through the recruiting process, visited you guys. You were able to build a relationship. You didn't get him the first time. You didn't get him the second time. But you still, the bridges weren't burnt, right? And he still felt comfortable enough with you guys that you were able to come back around in the transfer portal. Is that even more important now, to not just build relationships with the guys who are coming, but to also have, kind of that established in case guys are looking for new homes after a few years?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it still always comes down to the relationships, and you can make it about a lot of things, but we really feel like when we go through this process that most people are going to feel like, we treated them well, we loved them up, we supported them, we believed in them, and so, I think a guy like Dylan, for his case, like, a lot of our staff, like that would have been just after I got hired, like with his recruitment. So, but what I had heard and what our coaches talk about, I mean, it's all about relationships. So you have to keep it warm, especially the day and age with the transfer portal. You just never know when a guy's going to be out there now, and it could come back to you treat them really well, you treat the coaches really well. And so for Dylan's case, yeah, it definitely has helped us in that regard. And he's another guy, another instant guy we're really excited about, so it's been cool to kind of see his progression, and for him to now be walking through the doors and seeing him as Jayhawk is really cool.
I'm going to transition off of that, but kind of in a different route. But talking about Dylan Edwards reminded me of running backs, right? And I'm a huge fan of Corey Mockery. And, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I also know that, like, Lance's staff, Coach Leipold, Coach Kleiman, I'm sure Coach Klein now as well, probably Coach Drink, like all the local schools, so many even beyond that, like they're not a prisoner to the recruiting rankings, right? You guys have your own evaluations. You trust your own eyes. But Corey Mockery is a guy that I felt like at times maybe was flying under the radar, even though, he did have, I think at one point, a 4-star rating. But I think of a guy like Joseph Credit that Kevin and I have talked about on the show as a guy that's like, man, he's a really good player, but for whatever reason, maybe the recruiting industry is a little low on him. Do you feel like as a staff, maybe there are any guys in this class that you just felt a little bit more, higher on than maybe the industry was giving them credit for? And now that kind of the final rankings are in, you can kind of voice that a little bit of like, hey, we're a lot higher on this guy than maybe he was rated online.
Yeah. I would say Corey's definitely one that jumps out. I mean, you think about even Tyron Parker, he jumps out as why he maybe not higher. I think of Malachi Mills, why he didn't have more going on. Drayden Punts of the world. I mean, as a collective with this class, I mean, we really feel like we hit on a lot of guys that maybe were a little under the radar if you were to go off some of the just recruiting rankings, but whether it be portal, whether it be high school, I mean, it really still comes down to the evaluation piece and being confident that, I go back to some of those guys we offered the first offer. I mean, it's kind of nerve wracking sometimes when you're on uncharted territory if you're the first, right? And I think you have to trust it a lot more than it's easy to jump in after Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama have offered a kid. You feel a little bit better about it. It's not as easy to jump in all the time when you're that first, and it means a lot to us to be that first. It doesn't always happen that way because it is such a competitive market. But you have to trust it. And if a guy blows up, he does. But at the end of the day, you feel confident in what you're doing. That's really all that matters, And so this whole group, we are just collectively really excited about. But those are a couple I would say, probably surprised me, along the way that maybe they didn't have as much, going. But we like to think that that's our gain. Everybody else is lost. So
Josh Galbraith, obviously, you guys wound up fighting with Michigan over him. His recruiting ranking didn't necessarily reflect the type of athlete he is. When we talk about, and I asked Coach Leipold about it on the early signing period, that there aren't a whole lot of linebackers across the country as athletic as a Josh Galbraith is.
Yeah. Josh is he's a freak, man. I mean, we love having him and to get him right in town, and we're very fortunate. We have two really good high school programs right in town. And, again, unfortunately, everyone else knows that too, so you have to make sure that, you don't gloss over any of those guys that are within a drive. And I think that's, again, where we've just taken a lot of pride in that and building those relationships, but also making sure just, we have to check in on those guys just as much, if not more, because you can't take for granted that they're just 10 minutes down the street. And, that he's just coming over for another visit. Like every visit, a guy comes back, you try to chip away at doing something different and not just taking for granted that he's back around just because he's available to be back around. So,
Billy, I wanted to ask kind of a question for you. You've been a member of Coach Leipold's staff twice now, once at Buffalo, now at Kansas again. You kind of know the sort of players, the people that he's drawn to. So for recruits and prospects that are out there kind of interested in KU, what are two, three things, I mean, however many you want, that you would say you have to have in order to be recruited by and play for this KU head coach, Lance Leipold?
Yeah, you got to have you have a burning desire to love the game of football. I think that comes without saying, but the competitive nature, he wants guys that are going to do things the right way. And, we're all about competition, but he wants guys that are going to make sure they're 5 minutes before they need to be there, right? They're showing up with a great attitude, giving great energy. Coach is huge on that. All the small things, like that's really what's going to close the gap in so many different ways, right? We can have the most talented guys, but they're undisciplined. They're not going to be a guy that you can trust in the fourth quarter. You can't trust them to go to class. Like he worries about all of those small details. And really for us, that's been a benefit for our program. Both places that I've worked for Coach Leipold. And, it means a lot to him when you find those guys that are also talented, but even better individuals off the field. And that's really where, for this 26 class, you guys keep referencing, like we really feel like we hit a home run with all these guys because they're not just all of the most talented guys. They're even better people off the field. And both sides of the ball, I mean, we could not be more excited. And to have some of these guys that are here now walking across, I mean, you mentioned Josh looks unbelievable walking around the corner now. It's just, it's very cool to kind of see it all play out because, it's a difference in high school. It takes a longer journey, than the portal, the quick switch, they're here in and out, in a couple of weeks, and then they're back on campus. Like you got to recruit these guys, for multiple years on end. And that's really where the building of the relationship, it's cool if you fast forward a couple of years for them now step foot on your campus as a Jayhawk. Like it means everything to our program. So it's been cool to just be a small piece in the puzzle for these guys' journey.
You have an NFL background. You work for all three New York-based teams, the Bills, the Jets, and the Giants. I wanted to ask, are there any similarities between the NFL game and the way college football is now in terms of NIL and resource allocation, in terms of acquiring talent? Because you hear people start to talk about like, well, if you're going to go get a left tackle, here's the percentage of the cap that, your left tackle should cost you or things like that. I'm interested in how kind of you guys address that resource allocation as a staff.
Yeah. Well, I got to correct you. It wasn't the Bills. It was Bills training camp.
Okay.
where my undergrad was the St. John Fisher. They have training camp at the college. So
Okay.
to transform the whole university, it's pretty cool to see. But no, I think like anything, you establish what are the 5 or 6 main positions, and from a roster management, you have to really build those positions. I would say that's what every team focuses on, college and NFL. But I just think the competition, what people don't realize, the back third of the NFL roster changes every week. There wasn't a Monday or Tuesday when I was in the NFL that you weren't having workouts for the back half of the roster, not to mention the practice squads. And so we've really tried to ingrain that into how you can plug and play guys from the portal, how you can get guys that are competitive to help you out early as freshmen or redshirt freshmen. Competition's everything. And I think we've learned that the hard way sometimes, and making sure that you're always looking to increase your competition and your depth. And, especially as a new program, like it takes a couple years to do, but with this group, both high school and portal, we really feel like we put our best foot forward for this upcoming 26 season.
Billy, final question for me, and I want to pivot off the NFL thing that Kevin was just talking about, go to your time with the Giants and the Jets. And now as a director of scouting, kind of what element that you brought from the pros has kind of helped you in this new role as a director of scouting? Is there something that you feel like you learned at the NFL level, or again, kind of witnessed that it helps serve you now in the role you have in Lawrence?
Yeah, I think, again, just the versatility of your back third of the roster, and guys having to play special teams, having to play multiple spots in the offensive line. Your fifth receiver in the NFL has got to be a special teams standout. That's why we had so much hope, and it'll be curious to see how Emmanuel Henderson does this offseason here, right? So, I think the competitive nature of just the day-to-day in those buildings, on and off the field, it was a great learning experience, and you see the body types for sure, I think, but just the level of detail that goes into just finding one player, and the background that you do. And that's huge for us. You translate that to the high school level. I mean, you got to make sure you know who you're bringing into the building, and whether it be Josh Galbraith or Hunter Higgins, like I love both those guys on and off the field, and for guys that sometimes you love the talent and you want to be able to love what's off the field, but sometimes the juice just isn't worth the squeeze. And that's really vetting the background, talking to the high school coaches. And I think the level of detail that goes into it is unbelievable. And, we're seeing some of our guys go through that with the All-Star game circuit and getting ready for the combine. I mean, it's a lot, I know sometimes it's almost too much, but you have to make sure you're doing your background. And I think sometimes that's where guys miss more than not. And, so that part's definitely served me, really well. I think coming back to this level is just understanding all the details that go into it. And, you have to make sure you're doing everything you can to make sure you're bringing in the right people.
We have a lot of players and coaches and parents that watch this show. If somebody is interested in Kansas, they want to find out more, want to come to camp, whatever, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you guys?
Well, I would say social media is big. That's always, I think making sure you're following our program, following us as staff members on there. That's always going to be big. I think coming to camps is still something that, is a huge piece to this evaluation. And there's a lot of guys. I mean, like Joe Credit was a guy that came to camp, a guy that's, from Houston and comes up, goes to camp. We end up offering him, and his recruitment takes off. So I still think having those opportunities, coming on game day visits, is still big, because we can't get everywhere, but we can guarantee where the camps are going to have. I still think that goes a long way with people. But yeah, I think following us on social media, reaching out, that's never a bad thing. I think that's the beauty of the way this has all changed. If you don't have to, send videos out, you get to just now watch a streamline of Huddle. And, I think that's always really beneficial, and making sure your Huddle's up to date, that's always going to be big. It can't really, sometimes guys don't have up to date film, and like, man, you're hurting yourself, and help me help you in a little bit of that reward, right? And I would say those are definitely good avenues, but I still think camps are still really important.
Well, thanks again, Billy, for stopping by the show. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you enjoyed what you saw or heard, leave us a comment or review, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.